Have you ever woken up and felt it, that heavy emptiness in your chest? Not sadness, not depression, just nothing. A strange hollowness, like your life is happening in front of you, but you're not really inside it. Carl Jung called this feeling the cry of the soul. And today, we're going to explore what that means, and why feeling meaningless isn't a failure, but a message. Most people move through life carrying emotional weights that no one else can see. We wake up, get dressed, put on the face the world expects from us, and step into the roles we've been assigned: partner, parent, employee, friend. On the surface, nothing seems wrong. We laugh when we're supposed to laugh, nod when we're supposed to nod, and keep our daily routines running like clockwork. To anyone watching, we seem fine, functional, even stable. But somewhere beneath that carefully constructed surface lies a faint but persistent ache. A quiet discomfort we rarely put into words. Sometimes it feels like restlessness, other times like detachment, or a strange sense of watching your own life happen from a distance. You participate in the world, but you don't feel connected to it. You go through the motions, but they don't feel like yours. Carl Jung believed this inner emptiness isn't random or meaningless. It emerges when the life we live on the outside and the life that wants to be lived on the inside no longer match. Jung called the social mask we wear, the persona, the version of ourselves we present to the world to gain acceptance, approval, and safety. It is not inherently bad. We need a persona to function in society. But problems arise when we begin to identify with it so strongly that we lose touch with who we really are. When the gap between your outer identity and your inner truth grows too wide, the psyche responds with subtle emotional symptoms: numbness, disconnection, boredom, lack of motivation, and a growing sense that life feels strangely hollow. This silent pain doesn't arrive dramatically. It slips in gradually, like fog settling over a landscape. You might notice it in the quiet moments, when distractions fade and you're left alone with yourself. The hobbies that once excited you feel dull. The conversations you used to enjoy now feel draining. Even achievements, things you worked so hard for, bring little satisfaction. It's not that you're ungrateful or pessimistic. It's simply that the meaning you once felt doesn't flow through your life the way it used to. You try to push through it, convincing yourself that you're just tired or stressed. But the emptiness keeps returning, quietly insisting that something deeper is out of alignment. Jung believed this emotional vacuum is not a sign of weakness, but a psychological warning light. It signals that your authentic self, the deeper, instinctual, truth-driven part of you, is being neglected. This inner self doesn't disappear when ignored. It simply retreats, withdrawing its energy from your everyday life. And when the soul retreats, everything begins to feel flat, shallow, and strangely distant. The world continues to move around you, but you feel disconnected from it, like a guest in your own existence. This is why Jung said meaninglessness is not the absence of meaning, but the exhaustion of pretending. Pretending to be happy, pretending to be strong, pretending to care about things that no longer resonate, pretending that the life you're living is truly yours. Every day you force yourself deeper into the persona, your energy drains a little more, and over time, the mask becomes heavy, suffocating, almost unbearable. The tragedy is that many people never recognize this as a psychological alarm. They simply assume something is wrong with them. They blame themselves for lacking motivation, discipline, or positivity. But the truth is far simpler and far more compassionate. Your soul is tired of being ignored. Jung believed that the feeling of meaninglessness is not the end of life's purpose, but the beginning of rediscovering it. The emptiness you feel is not a dead end. It's a message, a quiet plea from within, urging you to stop living on autopilot and start listening to the parts of yourself you have abandoned. It's the psyche's way of saying, you can't keep living behind the mask. Something inside you wants to breathe again. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche communicates not in plain words but through symbols, emotions, and subtle disturbances. Our dreams, anxieties, moments of discontent, and even that lingering sense of emptiness are all messages from the deeper self, the salt, trying to be heard. But what happens when we refuse to listen? When we ignore these signals? When we suppress the inner stirrings that hint at our true needs? The soul doesn't simply continue trying to guide us. It begins to withdraw. The gentle whispers of intuition and inner wisdom fade into silence, leaving a hollow feeling that we often mistake for the emptiness of life itself. The shutdown of the soul is not a punishment, but a natural response to neglect. It is the psyche's way of saying, you are not living in alignment with me, so I will no longer lend you my vitality. One of the primary reasons the soul retreats is that we live someone else's script. From a young age, we are told what success looks like, what happiness should feel like, and what life paths are deemed acceptable. Maybe it's the career your parents envisioned for you, the romantic relationship you entered because it felt expected, or a lifestyle dictated by societal norms rather than personal inclination. On the surface, everything may seem in order. You follow the rules, you check the boxes, and yet, deep inside, something feels off. The soul recognizes when we are living a borrowed life, and when the discrepancy between who we are and who we are expected to be becomes too great, vitality starts to fade. Colors dim, passions dull, and each day can feel like a muted repetition of the last. Meaning drains from life because your inner essence, the part of you that longs to create, explore, and connect, is being ignored. Another reason the soul shuts down is the prolonged ignoring of the shadow. Jung used the term shadow to describe the hidden, repressed, or disowned parts of ourselves and emotions, desires, impulses, and even talents we refuse to acknowledge. Anger we deny, vulnerability we avoid, envy we suppress, and creative urges we stifle all sink into the unconscious. They do not disappear. They accumulate, pressing on our psyche from the inside. Over time, this unacknowledged energy manifests as a pervasive sense of emptiness, boredom, or meaninglessness. The more we push these parts of ourselves away, the more disconnected we become. The soul recoils because it cannot fully express itself in a life where key aspects of the self are ignored. As Jung would say, meaning leaves when we leave ourselves behind. Finally, sometimes life feels meaningless because we have simply outgrown our old identity. Growth and transformation are natural, but they are rarely comfortable. Old beliefs, roles, and identities that once provided structure begin to crumble as the person we are becoming emerges. This shedding can be disorienting. The emptiness is not a void of failure or lack, but rather a clearing of space where the old self dissolves to make room for the new. Jung emphasized that this process is inevitably accompanied by discomfort. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, he wrote. That pain, that contraction of the familiar, is necessary for the birth of a fuller, more authentic life. The sense of being stuck, lost, or disconnected is often the first sign that the soul is preparing for transformation, signaling that it is time to listen more deeply, embrace what has been hidden, and move toward alignment with our true nature. In essence, the soul shuts down not because we are weak, but because we are out of tune with it. whether by living someone else's script, ignoring our shadow, or outgrowing an outdated identity. The disconnection between our inner and outer life triggers a natural withdrawal. This withdrawal is both warning and invitation, a signal that something within us must change. Jung taught that this awareness, the recognition of emptiness, is not the end of the journey. Rather, it is the necessary contraction before the rebirth, the opening for a life that resonates with meaning, depth, and authentic vitality. When life feels meaningless, most people panic. We assume something is broken, but Jung saw it differently. He believed meaninglessness is a signal, not a defect, a call inward, a shift of energy from the external world to the internal one. It's your psyche saying, stop. Something important is missing. Stop. Look at who you've become. Stop. Listen to what you've silenced. In Jungian psychology, emptiness is the soul trying to get your attention. Think of it like psychic hunger. Your body growls when it's starving. Your soul grows silent when it is. That silence isn't a void. It's a message. When life feels hollow, the instinct is almost always the same. We reach for distractions. Overworking, scrolling endlessly through social media, binge-watching shows, attending every possible social event, chasing adrenaline and novelty. These are the ways we try to silence the inner voice that whispers, something is missing. Distraction is seductive because it offers temporary relief. It shields us from the uncomfortable recognition that, beneath the surface of our daily routines, our soul is quietly crying out. Carl Jung observed this pattern repeatedly. The more we bury ourselves in external stimulation, the more disconnected we become from our inner life. We confuse busyness for progress, noise for fulfillment, and entertainment for purpose. Yet the very acts that we turn to for comfort are the ones that keep us from discovering the source of meaning. Jung emphasized that the experience of meaninglessness is not something to run from, it is an invitation. It is the psyche signaling that we are out of alignment, that we have neglected our own inner landscape for too long. The fear that accompanies this emptiness is intense, and it is precisely why most people flee inward confrontation with distraction outward. The problem is that distraction only postpones the inevitable encounter with the self. It is a temporary anesthetic that dulls the pain without addressing its root. The soul's cry cannot be silenced indefinitely. It waits patiently, and sometimes insistently, until we turn toward it. Meaning, Jung argued, is born not in entertainment, not in noise, not in the constant stimulation of the external world, but in relationship with oneself. This is a radical idea in a culture that equates meaning with achievement, approval, or sensory pleasure. True significance arises when we allow ourselves to listen, to feel, and to engage with the depths of our own psyche. When we look inward without judgment, the unconscious begins to reveal its wisdom. Dreams, fleeting intuitions, and emotions that have been ignored or suppressed start to speak, offering clues, guidance, and insight. It is in this intimate encounter with the self that life gains coherence and purpose. The work of connecting with the inner life requires courage, because it forces us to confront aspects of ourselves we would rather ignore, fears, regrets, unresolved grief, or desires that society has labeled impractical. Yet it is precisely by facing these parts of the self that we reclaim meaning. The challenge is that turning inward is terrifying. We have been conditioned to associate comfort with external stimulation and danger with introspection. Stillness feels alien, silence feels threatening, and being alone with our own thoughts feels like vulnerability. Jung warned that avoidance of this inner work only deepens the sense of emptiness. Every distraction, every numbing behavior, is a barrier that separates the conscious mind from the unconscious. And the longer we remain distracted, the more disconnected we feel, until even moments of joy feel shallow and fleeting. Paradoxically, the very fear that makes introspection uncomfortable is also the gateway to transformation. Meaningfulness and self-awareness can only emerge once we are willing to face what has been avoided. Understanding this dynamic reframes the struggle of modern life. It is not the outside world that causes emptiness. It is the avoidance of the inner world. The battle is between distraction and connection, between fleeing from discomfort and engaging with it. Jung's perspective reminds us that the solution is not more stimulation or more busyness, is presence. It is learning to sit with ourselves, observe our thoughts, and listen to the messages of the unconscious. By doing so, we transform the experience of meaninglessness from a source of despair into an invitation to growth. The more we engage with our inner life, the less we feel the need to escape it. The louder the soul's cry, the more urgent the call to return to ourselves. And when we answer, we find that the answers we were seeking in the noise of the world were always within, waiting patiently for us to notice. Carl Jung spent decades exploring the human psyche, seeking to understand why life sometimes feels empty and what restores its richness when it seems to vanish. According to Jung, the experience of meaninglessness is not a permanent state. It is a signal that the soul is calling, urging us to reconnect with the deeper layers of ourselves. He identified 3 fundamental elements that, when cultivated, can return life's sense of purpose and vitality. Connection with the unconscious, living in alignment with the true self, and discovering purpose from within rather than from society. These pillars are not abstract ideas. They are practical guides to realignment, a way to bring the conscious and unconscious into harmony, and to feel truly alive again. The first and most profound source of meaning, Jung taught, is a deep connection with the unconscious. The unconscious speaks in dreams, intuitions, fantasies, desires, and subtle emotional nudges. These are the language of the soul, the whispers of the inner self that often get drowned out by the noise of daily life. Dreams, in particular, are messages from the deep, revealing truths that the conscious mind may refuse to acknowledge. They often highlight hidden fears, suppressed desires, or neglected potentials. When we ignore these messages, life can feel dry and hollow because we are severed from the part of ourselves that carries true depth. Meaning returns when we start to pay attention, when we take time to reflect on our dreams, honor our instincts, and explore our fantasies without judgment. Even fleeting intuitions, those quiet knowing moments, are signals from the unconscious pointing toward what is genuinely alive in us. By acknowledging and integrating these elements, we allow the psyche to breathe. And in that breathing, meaning begins to reappear. The second pillar of meaningful life, according to Jung, is living in alignment with your true self. This is the courageous act of authenticity, refusing to pretend, stopping the compulsive accommodation of others' expectations, and ceasing the self-imposed performance of societal roles that do not reflect who we truly are. Many of us unconsciously adopt masks the persona Jung described, to fit in, succeed, or be loved. While these masks may serve practical purposes, over-reliance on them creates a disconnect between the inner and outer life. The deeper self, the authentic essence of the person, begins to shrink away, leaving a hollow residue of meaninglessness. Meaning grows when authenticity grows. It emerges from small acts of courage, speaking one's truth, choosing a path that resonates with the soul, even if it defies convention, honoring one's unique inclinations, and allowing the inner voice to guide daily choices. Each time we align our actions with who we genuinely are, the outer world begins to mirror the inner world, and life feels coherent, purposeful, and alive. Finally, Jung emphasized the importance of purpose that comes from within, not from external validation or societal benchmarks. True purpose is not something we find in the outside world. It is something we remember, a latent part of the psyche that awakens when we stop numbing ourselves to the inner voice. External achievements, social accolades, or material possessions cannot generate lasting meaning because they do not resonate with the soul. Purpose, in Jung's view, emerges from internal coherence, a sense that our thoughts, feelings, and actions are aligned with our deeper essence. When our inner world and outer world match, even imperfectly, life begins to feel alive again. Meaning is not a result of perfection, nor is it contingent on society's definition of success. It is cultivated from an honest, intimate engagement with one's own life, an acknowledgement of both the light and shadow within. In essence, the restoration of meaning, according to Jung, is a journey inward. By reconnecting with the unconscious, living authentically, and discovering purpose from within, we realign our conscious life with the soul's deeper rhythm. Life ceases to feel like a sequence of mechanical motions and instead becomes a coherent, vibrant experience. When these elements converge, even small actions carry weight. Mundane moments are infused with significance, and existence itself begins to feel meaningful once again. Jung's wisdom reminds us that meaning is never truly lost, is always waiting inside, patiently urging us to awaken to our own life. Carl Jung often described periods of profound meaninglessness, not as failures, but as essential stages in the journey of the psyche. He called this descent a symbolic death, a time when familiar patterns, routines, and identities crumble, leaving you disoriented, uncertain, and stripped bare. It's a place where the life you once knew no longer works, yet the new self has not fully emerged. Jung likened it to a chrysalis, a cocoon in which transformation occurs unseen. It is both painful and mysterious, a time of surrender where the old ways must die to make room for something more authentic, more alive. In these moments, the soul seems to pull away, leaving you with emptiness, doubt, and fear. But this withdrawal is not punishment. It is preparation. The dark night of the soul is the psyche's way of forcing confrontation with the parts of ourselves we have ignored or denied. During this stage, nothing feels stable. Old routines lose their meaning, achievements feel hollow, and even relationships may seem disconnected. It is as though the world is familiar, yet strange. Your life is recognizable, yet alien. Jung referred to this state with the concept of enantiodromia, the principle that every force inevitably turns into its opposite. In psychological terms, what once defined you, what once gave you identity and purpose, begins to collapse. Your confidence may falter. The roles and masks you relied upon, student, worker, parent, partner, start to feel constraining. You may feel lost, confused, or even despairing. Yet, in this very collapse, the seeds of transformation are planted. Meaninglessness is not a void to be feared. It is the fertile ground from which a new and truer self can grow. One of the most important aspects of this stage is its temporality. The dark night of the soul is not permanent. It is a transitional period, a liminal space in which the psyche Jung suggested that resisting this phase only prolongs suffering. The more we cling to old identities or try to force life to feel meaningful in familiar ways, the more we block the emergence of authenticity. The descent into disorientation is painful precisely because it strips away illusions. It exposes what is inauthentic, unexamined, or imposed from outside forces. Yet it is also deeply necessary. The emptiness, the despair, the numbness are signals that the old ways are no longer sufficient, that the soul is calling for alignment, integration, and growth. This period also offers an invitation to reflection and inner work. Jung emphasized that meaningful transformation requires engagement with the unconscious. Dreams, intuitions, and emotional disturbances are the language of the psyche guiding you through this process. When life feels meaningless, it is often because the unconscious is attempting to communicate unmet needs, unresolved conflicts, or latent desires. Facing the darkness directly through introspection, journaling, meditation, or creative expression allows you to interpret these messages and begin the process of rebuilding. The dark night is the raw material from which purpose, clarity, and deeper meaning emerge. It is critical to understand that meaninglessness during this stage is not evidence of personal failure. On the contrary, it is evidence of evolution. The psyche is actively reorganizing itself, discarding outdated patterns, and preparing for a richer, more integrated life. The discomfort, the fear, and the uncertainty are signs that transformation is underway. Jung viewed this phase as a rite of passage. The destruction of the old makes space for the birth of the new. The collapse of identity and the confrontation with the unknown are essential precursors to individuation, the lifelong process of becoming fully oneself. Ultimately, the dark night of the soul is both a challenge and a gift. It forces you to descend into your own depths, confront your shadow, and relinquish what no longer serves you. The emptiness, though disorienting, signals that transformation is imminent. When navigated consciously, this phase allows you to emerge more whole, more authentic, and more aligned with your true purpose. Meaninglessness, Jung teaches us, is not an end, is the threshold to a fuller, deeper, and more meaningful life. When life feels empty or devoid of purpose, the natural instinct is often to escape, to scroll, binge watch, work harder, or distract ourselves with noise. But Carl Jung emphasized that the first step toward reclaiming meaning is to stop running. The soul communicates in subtle, often uncomfortable ways, and the emptiness you feel is its language. Instead of pushing it away, sit with it. Observe it. Listen carefully. Ask yourself, what is this trying to show me? This is not about forcing an answer or rushing to fix the discomfort. It is about acknowledging that the feeling exists and letting it be a teacher. Meaninglessness is often a messenger, pointing out misalignments between your outer life and inner self. When you stop resisting, you begin to recognize the lessons hidden in the void. Dreams are one of the most direct lines to the unconscious. Jung believed that your psyche is always working on problems, even when your conscious mind is distracted or overwhelmed. Keeping a dream journal allows you to track recurring symbols, emotions, and themes, providing invaluable insights into what your soul is trying to communicate. Even fragmented or disturbing dreams hold meaning. They are a map of the inner landscape that guides you toward understanding. By paying attention to these nocturnal messages, you start to reconnect with layers of yourself that are often ignored in daily life. Dreams remind you that your unconscious is not an enemy but a collaborator, offering guidance toward wholeness and authenticity. Another crucial step is noticing what truly drains you versus what energizes you. Meaninglessness often surfaces when you are living in ways that mismatch your authentic self. This could show up in a career that leaves you uninspired, a relationship that feels draining, or a lifestyle that contradicts your values. Your energy is an early indicator of misalignment before your conscious mind fully realizes it. Take time to observe how you feel after different activities or interactions. Which moments leave you feeling depleted and which leave you feeling alive? This simple, honest reflection can illuminate the areas of your life that are out of sync with your deeper self. Meaning is found in alignment, not in following external expectations or social scripts. Confronting your shadow is perhaps the most challenging yet transformative step. Jung's concept of the shadow represents the parts of yourself that you have rejected, suppressed, or denied. These might include fears, desires, anger, vulnerability, or creative impulses that feel unsafe to express. Meaning often hides behind these unacknowledged aspects. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to admit? What part of myself have I rejected? What emotion have I buried? Facing these truths is not about self-judgment. It is about integration. By acknowledging your shadow, you reclaim lost energy, release inner tension, and open the path to deeper purpose. The shadow is not something to eliminate, but a hidden reservoir of insight and vitality. Finally, allow yourself to change. Life's emptiness frequently signals that the old identity has outgrown its usefulness. When your soul no longer fits into the life you've been living, stagnation will persist until transformation occurs. Meaning does not emerge from clinging to outdated roles or resisting growth. It follows evolution, adaptation, and courageous self-reflection. Letting go can be painful, but it is essential. Each small step toward embracing your authentic desires, acknowledging hidden fears, and aligning your actions with your true self creates a ripple effect. What once felt empty begins to resonate with life again. In essence, responding to meaninglessness requires courage, patience, and introspection. You are not broken for feeling lost. You are at a threshold. By sitting with the emptiness, tracking your dreams, noticing what energizes you, confronting the shadow, and embracing change, you turn the void into a doorway. Jung's wisdom shows that what feels like despair is actually an invitation to awaken, to reconnect with your soul, and to live with authenticity and purpose. Meaninglessness, when approached consciously, becomes the signal guiding you toward a fuller, richer, and more meaningful life. If life feels meaningless right now, if you wake up with a heaviness you can't explain, if your routines feel hollow, if joy doesn't land the way it used, to take a breath and hear this clearly: nothing is wrong with you. You are not broken, defective, or failing at life. You are being called. What feels like emptiness is often the first stirring of a deeper psychological and spiritual shift. Carl Jung believed that meaninglessness is not a dead end, but a doorway. A threshold moment where the ego loses its grip and the soul begins to speak louder. When the surface-level purposes fall, ambition, approval, routine, the chase for validation, the deeper self finally has room to emerge. It's not that there is no meaning, it's that the old sources of meaning are no longer sufficient for the person you are becoming. This feeling of numbness or disconnection, as painful as it is, marks the beginning of transformation. Jung wrote that the psyche has an instinct for growth just as strong as the body's instinct for survival. When you feel empty, it's because your soul is withdrawing its energy from the life you've outgrown. It stops investing in what no longer aligns with your truth. This withdrawal feels like loss. In reality, it is preparation. The meaninglessness is a signal that the life you are living is too small, too limiting, too disconnected from your authentic nature. The pain is not punishment, is guidance. Jung believed that these moments of inner collapse are sacred. They are not signs of failure, but signs that something deeper within you refuses to settle for a half-lived life. When everything feels meaningless, you are standing at the border between your old self and your emerging self. The ego, the persona, the constructed identity, all of it begins to loosen. And in that space, the unconscious rises. It whispers through dreams, fatigue, longing, frustration, and the indescribable ache of there must be something more. This ache is not the absence of meaning, but the presence of meaning trying to break through. Meaninglessness, Jung said, is not emptiness, is a searchlight. A sharp beam cutting through the fog, pointing you toward what is missing, what is denied, what is unlived. It exposes the gap between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. And while this exposure feels painful, it is the beginning of authenticity. It is the soul saying, "The time has come. Go inward. Listen." In your most disorienting moments, the soul is closest. It rearranges you quietly, without permission, pulling you toward a larger life. The very things you think are falling apart are often the things that no longer serve you. The structures that collapse are the ones that keep you stagnant. The meanings that dissolve are outdated meanings, calling for renewal. Every loss of direction is the psyche pointing you toward a deeper, truer path. What feels like a breakdown is often the first step of a profound breakthrough. So if you feel disconnected from the world, do not assume the problem is you. The problem is the distance between your life and your inner truth. The numbness is a message. The restlessness is a compass. The emptiness is an invitation. You are not being abandoned. You are being summoned back to yourself. Your soul is not silent. It is speaking through the very discomfort you're trying to escape. It speaks through the quiet dissatisfaction, the sense of longing, the fatigue of pretending, the gentle but persistent whisper that says, there is more. And there is more depth, more authenticity, more purpose, more alignment, more life. Meaninglessness is not the end. It is the beginning of the life you were born to live. Your new self is waiting. Your soul is calling. And the journey inward is the way forward.